Hello and welcome to the Weshtern Philosophy Podcast. Two friends with oceans and oceans discussing the unseen forces in our lives through the lens of music, mystery, and crack. We have a Patreon. At Weshtern Philosophy Pod, don't forget the H. If you're enjoying the show and would like to see it grow, you can join this or make a one-off donation via the Ko-fi link, both in the show notes below. Today's topic was meant to be friendship, but after a certain amount of mutiny from a certain podcast host, it turned out to be teenagehood.
There's something I love about that chaotic energy because it's so life and death. It's so black and white. Everything that's happening to you is happening for the first time. You're starting to become a little bit self-reflexive. Yeah. You're like, oh, my girlfriend broke up with me. You know, this is my pain. I'm going to write an acoustic guitar song about this. There's something about like wearing all black and a heavy chain and like a band t-shirt which just says rotting corpse flesh or something, you know. And just being like, I am so attached to this identity and this band that I love that I am actually willing to take whatever judgment and whatever you're throwing at me, because actually this is more important to me right now. And I think there's something kind of beautiful about that. Start that. Do. Okay. Wow. The separation. Say something.
I don't really know what that means.
Oh, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. Two very, very independent waveforms. Is there anything more beautiful than two creatures existing in their own hermetically sealed spaces?
That isn't remotely funny unless you know you quite well. He's been complaining about organising his wedding for the last hour, and now he's like, if I could just go into a separate pod, and they could jettison me into space.
What do people think is happening?
Okay, so firstly, the not meta level.
Yeah.
Anthony has got a different mic clipped onto me because I am such a wily coyote kind of creature that it is impossible. And like listeners to our podcast, the ones who are still hanging in, thanks guys, you're brilliant. Like they will know you are measured, you are wise, you can speak into a microphone while sitting still. I am a man-child and I cannot, and I just run around.
And the last thing I want to take away from you, Bart, is your wildly pinwheeling arms as you deliver.
Well, this is really nice
topics.
That you're just like, no, we're not gonna force him into being good with microphones. We're just gonna strap a mic to him.
Lavalier mic onto him. So Bart now has a clip-on mic on his jumper.
Yeah.
On his nice blue jumper, the only one he owns.
This is a new blue jumper. This is a different. This is a different color of blue.
And I have so many near identical blue and green jumpers myself that I should not be casting stones from my gas house.
Cool colors work well on us, I think.
I'll go with that. So what we're having now is I'm looking at the DAW, the little software I record into, and I see when I talk, my band lights up, and when Bart talks, his band lights up, and a little bit of bleed into my microphone, but not too much.
But this will be eliminated
yeah.
by the end of the podcast.
So that is interesting because, of course, we all exist in our own spaces, but bleed into the spaces of others, and then combine to make beautiful things in sonic realms as well as psycho-emotional realms.
You don't have to do an impression of yourself. You are like that already. It's fine.
I know. I think I'm just becoming a self-parody. I think the faster I lean into it, the better for everyone. Definitely the better for my own health.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of psychic armor. You're like, if I'm trying to be this insufferable, then it's fine. You know?
Yeah. It's like Des Bishop had that thing of where he's like, sometimes he speaks with an Irish like accent, and then sometimes he has his original Brooklyn thing, and then when he talks American, he kind of goes very over, you know, and then he just goes, yeah, I don't need to do that. That's what I sound like anyway. So that's what it made me think of. Mm-hmm. But so what I didn't tell you is this morning, guess who was outside of Corfin?
The cops, the fuzz,
the guards.
Jesus, they're.
I got a right shock, and I started checking my windscreen for NCT stickers, If you don't know what that's in reference to, please go back to our authority episode. But so apparently every couple of weeks or months or whatever on Thursday morning, this is the crack. But they were really looking into the window, and I was like, they're looking for me. Like, where is he? The tall man, the tallest man in Clare. Is he there? No, but it was fine.
Yeah.
But it's funny how it does rattle you, though. You do go, fuck.
Yeah. What have I done wrong?
We were all so guilty. Yeah, guilty consciousness. Mm-hmm. One of them words. So anyway, I really like that about separate waveforms. That was really nice.
Thank you. It's I think people are here really to hear me waffle on about audio fidelity. I think basically the rest of the content of the pod is frankly extraneous.
Yeah,
I know.
We learned so much from him. Like somewhere in China, for some reason I see it being in China, they are just like, there's a whole classroom full of people going like, he's got the knowledge, we can get it. Why does he waffle on about all this other stuff? It's nice he references us sometimes, but
Well, here's a story.
Oh, go on.
When I was studying in Shanghai in 2008, I lived in the international student dorm. So there was the Irish contingent, there was a bunch of Finnish students, and obviously quite a few Asian students. There was a lot of Japanese students, and there was both North and South Korean students who did not mingle, as you can imagine. And I think it might have been Thursday evening, but once a week for an hour, the North Korean students had permission to use a classroom on the ground floor of the building and to lock the door. And they would go in there and they would listen to North Korean radio broadcasts. And our South Korean friends were obviously very intrigued by this. So they snuck down a couple of times and they listened at the door, and they said that while the broadcasts were in Korean, like they could understand the individual words, it was some kind of code or cipher and they could not understand the meaning at all. And every Thursday evening, the North Korean students would just gather around this little radio and listen for an hour.
And why were they allowed?
Well, the communists, like China and North Korea, are both communist countries. So North Koreans would have gotten they would have been taken care of.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't think about that.
Whereas South Korea being a democracy and, so China and North Korea, very close, obviously.
Oh, yeah, I didn't think about that, but that makes sense.
Yeah.
They kind of treat people in a slightly similar fashion. I do think North Korea probably even more aggressive.
But we don't need to get into the bastard Olympics this time in the morning.
No.
But
no need. So I just realised I wanted to get the notebooks, but
I'll get the notebooks.
I cannot move now.
Well, the funny thing is now, while you are more free to move at the table, you are also tethered by an umbilicus to the by an umbilical cord to the laptop. So I will.
Yeah, and I think the main reason he's done this is so I can't do one of my toilet escapes anymore, where I run off and go keep talking, because I would have to. No, I couldn't, because I couldn't even bring the Zoom, because then I would unplug it from the... Could I unplug it and plug it back in? That would be an experiment you would not like to see.
That's a good point. You'll actually have to unclip it. But I don't mind you going to the bathroom when we have a guest I can talk to, but it's when you go and leave me looking at the mic.
Why is that? You would think you would like a little break.
It's time for my solo.
Yeah. God, there's a lot of notes in here.
There is a lot of notes. What do I have here? My last notes say theatre versus film, Tom Hardy, Muhammad Ali versus Joe Frazier, Mighty Mouse, Ken Burns, Miles Davis, and Void.
Of course.
Yep.
He smiled when he said Void.
Yep. I love a void.
Love a good void.
Well, should we end the suspense and tell people what the topic is? Do people care? Do you think? I always treat it like this really big moment where I'm like, and today's topic. Like, does anyone like?
I really don't know.
Yeah.
We should ask them.
And also, actually, I just realised it'll be the title of the episode. So as soon as they click on it, it'll be...
It's funny that you haven't realised that
Well,
yet.
it's new to me. So today's topic is friendship.
Oh, do you want to take that again? Why did that?
Why? Because it came out like the Inbetweeners.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Friend.
Which I do think is like...
friend.
I think it is one of the best depictions of like teenage boy friendships.
Yeah, where it's just like, oh, you have a new friend. Oh, football friend. Yeah, no, they're very good.
Somebody reminded me of something that... No, I'm actually not going to say it. It was very cruel. But
yes,
if you, as a teenager, if you saw like, if you were hanging out with a gang of like your mates from secondary school and there was like somebody who maybe looked a little strange or did something a little strange, they'd like elbow you and go, "That's your best friend."
Yeah. Which is so funny.
It's awful.
That's so funny. We did the exact same thing in Holland. Yeah. But it's just so, there is something, because it's, I think sometimes what people don't understand about teenage boys is that there is also irony involved. Like, it's saying the thing that is so fucking daft that you just go, okay, yeah, and it's actually funny because it's so daft. It's not that we're like, well, this is the height, this is the pinnacle of refined humor. There was this stupid thing we used to do where we had a friend, what's this, like, we'd be sitting outside. We were hanging, the last couple of years of secondary school, we were mainly hanging out with three lads, and he would just come over to us and he'd go, are you guys talking about silicium? I don't know. Is that the right word? Is that oh, this is gonna be horrible.
the writer? Or
no, the I could use something else. Are you talking about some kind of chemistry?
Okay.
Table of elements. This story is not going
periodic
anywhere.
table.
Yeah, periodic table. Just any of them.
Okay.
So you would just go, are you talking about, that? And it would just be such a well, clearly, as we can tell from this moment, and I've not made, but it would just make us roar with laughter because it was just like the stupidest thing where you're like, hey, are you, hey guys, because you're claiming such nerdhood. No, thanks for laughing. It wasn't funny the way I told it, but it was just, I think people sometimes miss the fact that the guys doing it are aware how daft it is. Like that thing of like, that's your friend. It's such a stupid thing to say that's what makes you laugh. Anyway.
Oh my God! Why did I that one delivery of that one word has just brought me back to a load of like teenage memories, and I just remember there was one lad in our secondary school, and for the entire 5-6 years of secondary school, he would always stand next to you at the urinal and try to talk to you. And I just have this incredibly clear memory of being in like one of the bathrooms. Like we had multiple bathrooms obviously in the secondary school, and one that was particularly big and had a particularly long shared urinal, and I was tucked right, and it was like L-shaped, so like I had gone in and I had gone to the right into the wall, I was, as you do as a normal human man, just because like other people, you're leaving room, and and he just kind of, I hear the door open and the footsteps coming in. Then he comes up and like, you look left and he's there at the far end of the long urinal and you're like, please don't. And he's like, and he just walking over happy as anything. Like somebody walking up to you in the pub to say hello, but just kind of walks over, drops the fly, whips the lad out, turns over like, how's it going, Anthony?
Oh, no. So he wasn't doing it to fuck with you. He was just, he met, that's even funnier.
He might, we don't, he
because
did it.
My friends would definitely do that stuff just to be like, hello.
Oh yeah, sure. Like you do it the odd time, but like he did it for the entire duration of secondary school. And he's either a slightly odd man or a comedic genius, because if he had that commitment to the bit, I hope he was enjoying himself.
But not too much. This is bringing a lot back. There is something, even now when I see those lads and you see them kind of, there's always a bit of a wild energy, when you see lads in their teens kind of moving in a weird group that goes in and out because they're hitting each other or whatever. I always look at them and kind of go, if they're semi okay, you know, if they're being absolute dicks, you're like, come on, lad, fucking, you know. But most of the time, you can see harmless chaos. Quite nice. I've quite Oh yeah, so many memories. Yeah, my friend Thomas was always just such a weirdo, and he would always get me by just doing like. I remember one time we were doing a test, and you know, you were all sitting there. This was before the electronics took over our lives, just scribbling away, and the teacher looking that nobody was looking over it, because these classes were pretty big usually, you know, 30 people in a small room, and just that nobody. And he would just go over to me and he'd go, psst, and I was like, fuck off, lad, you know, because we'd get into trouble, and he'd just like grab his pencil, and he would blow on it, and he'd go, my flute isn't working.
My flute isn't working.
And even now, it's so stupid. But the tension, like with the urinal, like the tension of, no, this isn't supposed to be happening. And there's someone going out of their way to make it fucking shit. There's something about that I still... But isn't that lads' humour a lot of the time anyway? It's just fucking with each other.
Yeah, it is.
Just to do a gross stereotyping, but I think that's true.
One of my friends, they did after school study. So you'd stay after school for an hour or two to, you know, hit the books, and it was supervised, and it was like really strictly like no talking, nothing, you know. Obviously, I think it was leaving cert, so like it was serious enough. And a girl in the class had brought, she was like really liked Harry Potter. Yeah. So she was on like one of the later books, and she was kind of obsessed with it. So she actually brought it into to after school study, and she was like reading it. And my friend was like sat in front of her. He kind of turned around. He's like, "Hey, what are you reading?" She's like, she didn't want to talk, so he kind of showed him the cover. And he's like, "What is that? I can't see." You know. She's like, so he's like, he reached over and he took it, and he turned back around, and the page she was on, he tore it out slowly, excruciatingly slowly, and started to eat it.
Oh no! See, that's just too far now.
And then just tore it up into tiny bits, chewed, swallowed, turned to the next page.
Oh no! Oh no!
And just proceeded to eat like a handful of pages of her Harry Potter book while she was like just behind him, like quite. And you can't like put up your hands like, "Excuse me, miss, he's eating my book."
Did she get a new one? No.
I think she must have done. They ended up going out for a while as well.
The old eating her book technique. It always works.
Oldest trick in the half-chewed book.
Well done, sir. Well done. It's funny that we both got into exactly the same energy then. So it must be quite universal anyway. The east of the Netherlands and Kerry, exactly the same lads in teenage years.
I think it's just teenage boys, isn't it? Like you said, it's that wild, directionless energy that gets funneled into mad things like Metallica versus Megadeth, or Oasis versus Blur, or you know, new metal versus thrash metal. These were like serious debates that were going on.
But it's funny as well because there's such, like you said, like there's all these little clans, and then it's like, they're not our people, or they're not. And then everyone grows up a couple of years and sees each other again and go, they're actually all lovely. Yeah. You know, like there's that fun. I really found that funny when you go to university then, and people just all suddenly, everyone is trying to be friends. Like nobody's trying to bully anyone or push anyone out, or maybe I just had a nice study group, but it was just like, whereas in secondary school, there was quite a lot of antagonism.
Yeah, the cliques,
Yeah, the cliques, and like there was bullying, and you had to be mindful of yourself, you know, that kind of was, and it was crack, but even, I think sometimes people who haven't experienced that, or are older now or whatever, will look at groups of lads and go, fucking youths, or
youths.
Yeah, as you always say, youths. But then I find it quite easy to see, no, these are, they still have the chaos, but these are the ones that in a couple of years are going to be your doctor or something, you know, they're going to be fine. But, and then there's the ones where you go, ooh, there's a bit of actual darkness there, you know, there's like where that chaos doesn't get directed. And
I think it's the quiet lads you need to be careful of. But
like yourself.
Like myself. No, I was a hyperactive teenager because I was like a clown trying to fit in.
Yeah,
So
same,
that was
There's a
my
photo
vibe.
of you that you showed in your early 20s, and I was like, oh, that's just like me.
Really,
Yeah, very similar energy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's I kind of love teenage energy. I just so a little bit of a tangent, but like one thing I hate in my Chinese medicine clinic is when anything gets ascribed to hormones, unless it's an actual like endocrinological disorder. I hate it when women's health issues are just chalked up to these nebulous. Oh, that's just hormones, And I was like, that's such a stupid thing to say, because everyone like that also doesn't help, right? Because everyone has hormones. And I remember I said this to a teacher, and she was like, she's like, people associate hormones with women. If you really want to learn about hormones, hang out with teenage boys. And like, she's so right, because everything's life or death as a teenager, and especially as lads, like you're all of a sudden you're tall and strong and horny. You know, like
so horny. I'm really sorry to name it, but Jesus Christ,
look, we invoked the Inbetweeners at the start, and that's another thing it depicts.
Oh, and thank God it's died down a little bit anyway. Because it's untenable.
But there's something I love about that chaotic energy, because it's so life and death. It's so black and white. Everything that's happening to you is happening for the first time. You're starting to become a little bit self-reflexive. You're like, oh, my girlfriend broke up with me. You know, this is my pain. This is like, I'm going to write an acoustic guitar song about this.
The drama, man. The fucking drama.
And I kind of love it, because... like you said, when you get to your 20s, when you get to secondary school or the workplace, everyone's like trying to get along a little bit more, and obviously that's nicer.
Or to university,
but like, or university, sorry, but like, and obviously that's nicer, and it's more empathetic and so on. But there's something about the conflict. There's something about like wearing all black, and a heavy chain, and like a band T-shirt which just says like rotting corpse flesh or something, And just being like, I am so attached to this identity and this band that I love that I am actually willing to take whatever judgment and whatever you're throwing at me, because actually this is more important to me right now. And I think there's something kind of beautiful about that.
Oh, 100%. And the moralizing as well. That's part of where you're like, I remember certain things happening and me just being like, no, I have to put my foot down. This is just... I am a moral creature, and I will tell you what's... And now you just look at that kind of stuff and you go, oh, God. I've had the same Gmail account since 2002. So I can read back into that time. And I will tell you, I don't think I've done it more than a handful of times, because it is intense. And I try to be very kind when I connect back with that version of myself. But Jesus... You do change an awful lot, don't you?
Well, your identity is going from being malleable to being fixed, and teenagehood is kind of the middle of that process. I think you're finding out.
But even now, it's still moving so much. Like I feel so differently about so many things than even 5 years ago.
Yeah, but I think it is, and it definitely, we never stop changing.
But the personality is maybe more fixed.
Yeah, and I think just as a kid, you're quite fluid. Of course, like kids will have a few things they really put their foot down. Like they will not eat strawberries for 3 weeks or something, But as a teenager, that's like happening on the conscious level. You're like, no, I am anti-capitalist or something. I remember I had a friend that was like a few years younger than me because of I'm in college when I went to China and came back, and so basically I was in my final year of my undergrad, but I was in with some first years, and this guy was a particularly young first year as well, and a clever guy, but he was just discovering a lot of stuff for the first time. And like, I know I was only in my mid-20s, but there was still a big difference between mid and early 20s.
You feel
and we were just having conversation. He was like, yeah, man, I just have my questions about capitalism. I've been reading this guy called Noam Chomsky. He's really good. You should check him out. And you're just there like,
yeah, dude.
Yeah.
We've all been on this ride.
I'm delighted you're going through your Chomsky phase. It's a great phase. But like, and when I say Chomsky phase, you're discovering Chomsky. I'm still in a Chomsky phase. But
of course, clearly.
But the discovering of it, and then when you're like, oh my God, you guys really need to check this guy out.
Have you always So let's do it a little chronologically. Have you always had nice friend groups? Like when you were in primary school and stuff?
Oh, no. I had no friends in primary school. But yeah.
Fuck, sorry.
No, it was lots of reasons. I think I'd love to keep the episode focused a bit more on the teenage years because I'm enjoying that. And I'd rather
we're going back there because we're going chronologically. But
no, I didn't. I had serious trouble making friends. And then in secondary school, it was when I started playing. Things got a bit easier, but it was when I started playing music. Music was like the social outlet for me.
Yeah.
And weirdly enough, and it's unfortunate, it takes you fucking 3 decades so to figure this stuff out. But like, I'm better at connecting with people when we're sharing a project together.
Yeah.
Like I love that. My first really close group of friends, actually even before music, was I went to volunteer in Belarus with a charity and a bunch of other teenagers, and that's where I met, for example, Neil O'Brien.
Yeah.
You know, so doing that kind of project with a load of like-minded people and doing something kind of big and something that required effort and that was bigger than us. That's the way I connect with people. Whereas like if you just put me in a room with a load of new people, I'll probably just go in the corner and pet the dog until it all blows over. You know, that is no good for me. And so I'm still like that now. Like I rather like do things with people, play music with people, do a project with people. You know, even if I'm just photographing an event, it's easier for me to be at the event than just be at it. So that was the kind of way in. Belarus, and then music was that for me.
Yeah. And I don't want to poke at these scabs too much, but you've left a lot of space. So do you think that was the main thing in primary school, just still figuring out how to interact with the outside world?
It was other stuff as well.
Okay.
I was really bookish and stuff like that, and it was not a school that looked too kindly on people that read.
We shall not name the school.
No, it was just. Yeah, it was
more GA and that kind of stuff.
Well, it was soccer, weirdly enough. It wasn't because weirdly enough, I'm a Kerry man, but I'm from a hurling parish. So God love me. That's the root of most of my trauma.
Yeah.
But so again, I don't know if I've said this before. Kerry is one of the best counties, arguably the best county in Ireland for Gaelic football, and it is really quite average at hurling.
Yeah,
you know, so. I'm from a hurling parish. Yeah, there was very little Gaelic football played, and it was mostly soccer. It was soccer all day, every day at the school, which was something I just have no interest in.
That's funny as well that they were like hurling, but then still the soccer to compensate for
you can't give a load of 10-year-olds hurleys and just entertain yourselves there. You know, soccer ball, I suppose, is a bit safer. How about you, Bart? How was your experience?
We can all note what he did there.
Yeah,
no, always pretty good. But I think definitely from a very, very, really actively people-pleasing kind of outward looking towards the other person. I saw a photo there recently of me at a birthday party with like age 7 or something, and I was holding court. And it's just like...
I believe that.
Yeah. Thanks. Dickhead, yeah. But so it was always good, and I was always really sensitive. So sometimes people would, pick on that, but then I was always handy enough as well to kind of work with that, or also just take that on the chin a little bit. But I remember, it's funny when you go into this stuff and so many things come back. We used to have a very strict, I don't know if it's the same here, it probably is, but in primary school, you get a teacher per year. Actually, in the school my kids go to, it's a bit more in flux, so sometimes they'll have the same teacher for 2 or 3 years and then it'll change. But for us, it was really clear, like if you're going to that grade, it's that teacher, and then up the way. And there was one guy who taught one of the particular grades, and he was really strict, but he also loved playing the guitar. And he loved, and we all really enjoyed his music lessons. So he had one particular year he was teaching, but he would also do, for all the years he would do music, and we'd be singing like the Beatles and stuff like that. But there were also these songs called Smartloppen. Right, how are we going to translate that? So smart is grief, and loppe is like a very old kind of word for a... Well, I'd say a sheet of something or something. Like it could even be a bit of meat, but it could also be a sheet of text. So it's kind of that. Okay. It's kind of like... yeah.
Your hand movements are amazing. I wish I could explain them.
Well, it's funny. I'm even noticing that I'm sitting differently now. I have the lav mic on, but anyway, doesn't matter. But these songs are just like the grief-filled Dutch songs,
right?
And I would love the music lesson. I would love the singing, and I really enjoyed his Spanish guitar playing, and I would really enjoy that. But then we got to these sad songs, and I would just have to really try not to cry, and I would just be for an hour trying not to cry. And actually, I have to say the primary school was really nice because there was very little bullying, and even like there was it's horrible to say, there's one kid in our class who just people nearly couldn't help. I actually didn't, but people nearly couldn't help bullying him, which is, one of these people who just has kicked me on it, written in his soul or something. I know I shouldn't be laughing because it's sad, and I actually always try to be kind, but even in being kind, I was always a bit like, oh, dude, could you not?
Yeah, meet us halfway.
Try a little bit, But they were really strict. It was quite a small school, and they were really strict. I remember us having these class-wide chats of like, guys, how are we gonna not be a dick to him? Come on, But so the sensitivity was always a thing, but it was kind of fine. But then going to secondary school, I found it much harder. It was much rougher and I found good friends after the first 2 years. After like my third year of secondary school, I made really good friends. But the first 2 years, I found pretty rough, and we had we were attached to a big Dutch soccer club, our school, and so all the lads who wanted to play for them, they had like sort of a specific curriculum for football and other sports, and those lads were tricky, So I always found it hard when I was having to deal with them. But then I found really good friends, and I started acting in school plays, and I really loved that. And then I started playing the guitar, and that really helped as well. So we both had something with... I think like I was always had an act of being social that I was able to perform, but I think I grew more into myself definitely second half of secondary school. And then one of my best friends died, and that really knocked me, but also... I think Joe Flynn said this, I don't know if he said it in therapy sessions or on the podcast, is there any difference? Yeah. But he's like, if you're in grief, you cannot but be present.
Yeah.
And I think there was, because then the second half of secondary school, or the last 2 years after she died, I had real trouble focusing. But actually it was my stepdad, actually, Philip, he said like, I was like, yeah, it's really a problem because of this grief, and now I can't focus. He's like, yeah, but also, are you not just more yourself? And it was a very good observation of him, because before I was always like trying to be top of the class and really trying. And then it was more like, fuck it, I'll just do whatever I need to do to get by,
It's I don't know if you call it the gift of fatigue or these other pressures, is that if you have a lot of energy, you can do a lot of useless shit. If you have very, very little energy, it's interesting to watch somebody who's ill or in pain of any kind and how they choose to spend their time. Yeah, and you'll see what's of true value there,
exactly.
So I hear I think that's a very wise quote from Philippe.
Yeah. No, it was, and what was really nice was when with her passing, then I also picked up the guitar, which I'd been thinking about, and then I did it. And that was one of the nice things with the secondary school I went to, was that we were kind of, our village was in the middle of two big secondary schools, and one had just been like renovated into this really new high-tech kind of building. So everyone of my primary school went there, and there was only a handful who went to the other place, including myself, and it was more focused on, well, sports, but also creative pursuits. And they had a great music teacher who, they just had this huge class, like literally huge, like size of this house kind of, with like 20 guitars and 5 drum kits and fucking turntables, and that was and 10 pianos, and so that was really cool. And he made us all sing every year. You had to do every instrument and you had to sing. And he was like, I don't care if you can't sing, you are all because also for a secondary school in Holland, there's already like a certain levels to it in terms of what is expected of you regarding academia. So he was like, you guys are probably going to university or the one below, which I don't know what that'd be called here, higher HDIP or something maybe? I don't know. Anyway, but he's like, you're going to have to talk in front of people and do that shit. So I want you to sing, and even if you're terrified, it's about the effort. Mm-hmm. And if you close your eyes, you'll get 1 point. Out of 10, you'll get an extra point.
Oh, wow. Which
is funny because now I love closing my eyes when I'm singing because I don't have to take in all the other stimuli. But I think that was the problem, was that most of my friends from primary school went to the other place. But it was one of the first times I really remember choosing something really for myself as well, where I was like, yeah, that building is really fancy, and this is like an old fucking factory that my mum actually went to that same secondary school, been there a long time, and it got demolished in my last year because it was so not fit for purpose. But I was like, the energy of that I prefer, so we'll go there, you know. So, yeah, but good days, all in all, good days.
My first year in secondary school, the new school was being constructed.
Yeah.
And was going to amalgamate 2 schools. So I went to one of the schools that was going to be swallowed up. And obviously, because they were building the fancy new school, my first year was the last year in these buildings.
Yeah.
And no work had been done in them.
No one gives a fuck anymore.
Years. And like, I remember just like, we'd be rough housing. I saw somebody got put through a window. It was like an old like single page. It was like, like what do they call it? Candy glass. Yeah, that kind of. And I remember we were out in science class and our teacher was a few minutes late, and we could hear that the class next door, their teacher also wasn't there because we hear them talking. So we kicked a hole through the wall just so we could like wave at them.
That's what
like, it was out of control. The labs were ridiculous. They looked like labs from like 80s movies, like, you know, Flubber or something, with just exploding Bunsen burners and stains all up the walls and smoke marks. And yeah, it was smelled weird. And yeah, it was just
that energy is so funny.
It's so funny. And then just to fill it with a load of teenagers, you know. I remember how weird it was as well, being a first year and being like at the bottom of the food chain, and like my secondary school would be known for basketball. So like there'd be like some very, very tall men striding around like giraffes, you know, like Shadow of the Colossus or something like that. And you'd just be there trying not to get trampled. Really, really funny times. It sounded like you found the right place for you though in your
definitely school. Definitely. You're bringing up so many memories. We had because we had so many sports people in, we also had one of the Olympic volleyball players, and you can imagine that Dutch volleyball players, that is as tall as you can go. So this guy was, well, I can only do it in meters. He was like 2 meters 20. So he like I looked tiny. Right. Like it was like that much above me, you know, and you're like his friends who were just normal sized, they'd be fairly tall for Irish standards, and he would just look like children. It was just, he had to really like a giraffe, because also really lanky. But then you also put me in mind of my chemistry teacher, who was just like this guy who'd done a lot of research, and then it didn't really work out, and he was gone into teaching, which, by the way, I want to make really clear, I don't think that is like a secondary option, because sometimes people make it seem that way, but it's more, it was for him,
right?
You know, I think for a lot of people it's like, it's one of the most important things you can do is teach young minds. But it was like put me in mind of that poem, Taylor Mali poem, What Teachers Make. You should look that up. That's great. It's really good. You would like that too. He wasn't like that, so he was just kind of like, fuck. And he would just, let us set shit on fire. And he would always, but he would enjoy that adolescent humor.
Mm-hmm.
And I always called him JJ. It was like, hey, JJ. He's like, Bart, don't call me JJ. And I was like, that's okay, JJ. We just can't. Like, there was this fucking problem with authority, you know. But what I also found cool, they were all real people, you know, like, and that was a real thing at that school. It's like when you ever went in for parent-teacher meeting or something, they'd be like, oh no, I see this, I really appreciate that. And like they were like, it really made me understand that there's a big difference between, the way you are managing kids and then the way you are really...
I appreciate the deeper point you're trying to make, but I'm just getting like a flood of weird, stupid memories. Like,
he wants to keep this superficial. We can go into the deep, Anthony.
Just make a note to get deep later. But we had a physics teacher who I suppose he was like really old at the time. I guess he was probably in his he was like 34 or something, you know. But he had like floppy black hair and he was like a bit pale and moody. You know?
Oh, that's a good emoji.
And he used to he was like really cranky. He was like a cross between like was it Snape and Bernard Black or something like that? And he used to like come in and he'd like, right, just do this exercise and stuff. And he'd put us work in something. And he'd just take an apple, right, in the class and he'd eat it. But he'd attack it. He'd like look at the apple for a second and he'd go, he'd like take this massive chunk off it and he'd do it violently, so it was like the crack of the apple split. Like, you know, like if anyone listening has ever seen Blarney eating a carrot, it was like very similar energy. And he'd like,
that's our whole audience,
and before memes were even a thing, like the girls in the class were kind of memeing this, being like, I want to be that apple or something like that, you know?
That's hilarious.
But, and again, self-aware. Like,
of course.
And the other thing we found, and unfortunately we found out too late, probably only at the start of sixth year, but like if you could get him talking about like shoegaze or post-punk.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, if you could just get... Which Tears for Fears album was the song on the video? He'd be gone. He'd talk for 20 minutes. Like, I remember he was like... There was like a computer in the classroom, which was like a really big thing. And he like, it had never been turned on in like the whole time we were there, and he was like sending us to find plugs and extension leads so we could turn on the computer and boot up fucking Windows 95 or whatever, so we could listen to like this bootleg Tears for Fears CD that he'd gotten from his car. Yeah, so yeah, they were people, and we punished them for that.
Really punished them, yeah. But I think that there's a weird thing with it nearly makes me think of like performing on stage. It's like these people who didn't pick to perform or something, but then they suddenly, with all their idiosyncrasies, thank you. I was going to say idiosyncronicities, which is a whole different... But idiosyncrasies, like being in front of these kids who are paying a lot of attention to them and have to listen to them, but then the personality seeps out. And now when I go through all the people who taught me, and especially in secondary school, I'm just like, they all had really odd things, but in a great way. There was this guy who was in charge, like he was an administrator, and he was in charge of absence, they would call it, you know, like if you were absent from a class or whatever. And he was really gruff, and he had this huge grey, like Ronnie Drew kind of style beard, and he had this very low voice as well. And he would just always be giving out, and he'd be like, lads, fucking, you know. And he wasn't... I always liked the people who weren't nervous. We had some teachers, you know, that were just like, guys, please. And then those would be the ones that the bullies would make cry, you know, like, which is always a horrible thing to see, because you'd be like, oh, God. And you're kids, and you don't really know what to do with that. I always then try to be kind, but that makes it maybe worse even to get the pity from a 14-year-old or something, you know. But
it's definitely not a solution.
No, but he was always just like, just really gruff. And then one day there was something, in our yearbook at the end of school or something, he said, Bart, ideal student. Never had much to do with them. But then, and everyone teased me for that, of course, because it was just like, but it was kind of funny. But he was just like, he respected that he never had to sort of deal with me. And then one time I I completely forgot that at the end it was kind of fragmented. So sometimes you would have like 2 hours in the morning, and then there'd be an hour where you could fuck off and then you come back. And I just forgotten to come back for some English class. And he was just like, yeah, you're really good at English. You missed English. And he's like, why were you not there? And I was like, I forgot. And he's like, Jesus, that's a new one. And he's just like, just come sit here beside me, read an English book. So I just read Return of the King for an hour. And he's like, well. And then we just, all these weird little interactions. But then also when I was going through that grief period, like there was a lot of support. So we're meant to talk about friendship. We're mainly talking about school. But I think, it's cool the people you meet, and then we both went to university, and you kind of see how you meet different people again there who share a similar interest, and then even after that, like it does keep changing. I've noticed it recently. Like my current friends, it gets. I do feel the people around me now are so much closer to who I actually. Or who they're really aware of who I actually am. Whereas earlier on, it would be the persona that people would see a lot. But I also really recognize this thing of you're saying, like, I do well with projects. I really have this with men. Because with my female friends, I go out for coffees a lot of time. I do this with male friends as well. But male friends, it often works best if we're doing something together, making something together, or have a job to do, or... go for fucking hikes, or it's funny.
Just to lower the tone one little bit, one last thing I just remembered from secondary school. This has nothing to do with anything, but we used to make bets.
Yeah.
If you lost the bet, if you wouldn't, I don't know, if you flinched when somebody gave you a dead arm or something like that.
Important,
You had to unsilence your phone.
That's a good one.
Right, okay. So, and you had to put the ringer on full volume, and you had to go into class, and if you got a text or something, you would have to go off, right? Yeah. My text alert tone was an audio clip from Enter the Dragon of Bruce Lee kicking somebody flying backwards, and he's going...
And obviously they would ring you.
Yeah, they text and ring and stuff, and I was in a German class with a very quiet teacher. Yeah. Like very kind of lovely, kind of mousy woman who didn't love conflict or anything like that. And
the mousy people usually don't.
And then whatcha? She's, oh dear. What an unusual sound. Whatcha? Oh, there it is again. Just whatcha? Can you hear that? You can.
No. Yeah. What are you talking about?
Yeah. So, yeah.
No, we can say on the horrible reminiscences.
I think teenagehood is kind of
it's a deep well. I remember we had one teacher, very kind man who also helped me a lot when I was going through a hard time there. But he was so deaf that during tests we could just go, right guys, question 2, don't move your mouth, don't move, just question 2 is the answer is B, and he just would not, like, we'd be looking at him and he was so deaf, he just wouldn't pick up. It was hilarious. Yeah. He would fucking do it as well. Like, there's not an ounce of honesty in those kids.
I tell you, one thing being a teenager taught me, and I know this is my favorite topic, but it did teach me how to deal with like conflict and opposition. I think it didn't teach me how to be any more comfortable in myself. I don't actually think it taught me to be any more authentic or anything like that.
I don't think it's a comfortable time anyway.
No, but like... I would have been very, very nervous as a small child, and the comfort of rebellious music, of playing metal and stuff like that, was great. And by the way, while I was playing metal, I was mostly listening to Joni Mitchell. Like, it was, I was the saddest metaler, but it was the social thing. And there was parts of metal I liked. Metal has a great community. Like, metalers are great people, and they're really passionate, and they're usually very, very open-minded, and they're like I'd be more scared of a man in a suit than somebody wearing a leather coat and a Slipknot t-shirt. But I remember I had this thing in the leaving cert where we had these what's the invigilators? It's a great one of those lovely Latin words we still keep around. So we had people coming in from outside the school to observe, obviously, while we're doing our papers. And it was like my leaving cert chemistry, which is like, tricky enough one. It was not a subject I had a particular aptitude for, and it was something I was a bit, I had to work at this one. I wasn't super nervous, but I was a bit nervous. They hand out the exam sheets, and they handed out for certain papers, like for English, they had these like blank sheets, not blank, but you'd fill in the subject name, and they could be used for like English or geography or whatever, and I'd been using them for some other subjects, and I got handed the exam sheet and one of these. And at the end, I handed them up, and he was like, "Where did you get this?" And I was like, "You gave it to me." And he's like, "That's not part of this exam. You smuggled this in."
Oh, wow.
And he's like, "You're a cheater." And I remember it was really nice. All my friends around were like, no, you, we saw you give that to him. And he's like, your whole exam is being nullified. And he was like an old lad. And I personally think he knew he'd screwed up, and he
tried to overshout. Yeah.
But I just remember being just completely just like, no, this is on you, man. And I know, like, at entering secondary school, if a person in a position of authority had like told me something like that, I would have gone to pieces. Yeah. And I just remember being completely like, no, absolutely not. No, this is on you, buddy. What's your name? What's your name? And I remember afterwards, I just walked out and I just found the vice principal, and I was like, "Hey, come here. By the way, your invigilator fella, he's after doing this and that." And your man, again, panicking. He's like, "Don't worry, you're leaving, sir. It's going to be okay and stuff." And he's like, "We'll investigate this." And I'm like, "I'm fine with this." And when teenagers are coming to me in clinic and they're like, "Oh man, the leaving cert's such bullshit. Who cares, for this rote learning kind of stuff." I'm like, for many people it is. For many people, this form of examination where you have to memorize a load of stuff and then sit down and regurgitate it over 2 or 3 hours is absolutely in no way an accurate measure of your intelligence or your value or your aptitude or anything. But the act of learning to navigate a system like that is very beneficial. Learning how to work hard at something you don't like, and how to stay calm, and how to deliver under pressure. Like that, those are skills that are really beneficial, even if the leaving cert itself is kind of bullshit. So
100%, I think so. And what you said about conflict, that really resonated with me, because for me, it was mainly, I don't know, I think I'd always been okay with dealing with adults. I went a lot with my dad had like business trips where we'd be dragged along and we'd have to be, good little adults kind of in a way, which was very was fine. That sounded a bit bitter. It was absolutely fine, and you learned a lot from it. But it was more, I found, like when you had kids your own age or a year up who were just really enjoyed that terrorizing you a little bit, and then how to stand up, when to kind of just laugh with people laughing at you, and when to just go, "No, fuck that. I'm gonna crack you one." Sometimes. It was funny, like a friend, like, who was nearly 60 now, was telling me a story last week of, I think it was a story of him in his student house doing the dishes and or student digs or whatever you call it, and doing the dishes of someone who hadn't done the dishes for the umpteenth time, and then the guy coming downstairs going, "Oh, it's great, dishes are done." He's like, "No, it's not great. I did fucking dishes." And then the perpetrator of not doing the dishes put a pan on his head, and he just cracked him one, and I just went, "Yeah, that's right." And he was like, "No one has ever responded to it like that before." And his wife, who I'm great friends with as well, was there, and she's like, "Oh, okay." I was like, "That's not the way to handle it." I was like, no, there's definitely better ways to handle it. But if someone is shaming you after you've sorted out their mess, you definitely need to do something, and I'm happier that you cracked him one than that you didn't do anything. And it's even better if you could do that without violence. Yeah. But there is something about and especially in that wild kind of teenage. Like, I was never violent or anything, but sometimes when someone just fucks with you, you just have to give them a shot, or you just have to go, "No, this is my boundary."
Yeah, I was thinking about this the last day, that in a weird way, I was thinking about one of the things I got from martial arts. One of the things I got from it is like just knowledge of bodies, I didn't play sports. So you know, I'm being like a small, skinny teenager and like in rough housing and stuff, and somebody pushes you and you just feel yourself completely you're like, oh my God, this person has so much power over me, you know, like that's not pleasant. And you start doing martial arts and you start like learning how to work with bodies in a controlled space, and it's not even about defending yourself or something. It's just about, like, I can look at somebody and I kind of know how their body would move, you know, and like how it would feel to grapple and stuff. And I was just thinking, dancing kind of does the same thing, you know, and like we don't really have these kind of ritualized dances anymore. But like, isn't that a lovely thing, just to be like, okay, you're a teenage boy, teenage girls are terrifying, but here's a place where there's adult supervision, like not the teen discos we have now, but I'm thinking like more old school, where there'd be like a pair dance or a slow dance or something like that, and you start to you start to like feel the physicality of the other person, and in a safe and controlled way. And my God, that's so important. And I think, you know, if you're losing that, if you're not getting into safe spaces where you can like interact with other people, and just like a variety of people, like, you know, in martial arts, you'll train with like your best mate, but you also train, this fucking guy, you know? And it's great. It's great to like spend like an hour with this fucking guy that just drives you crazy. He won't stop talking. He gets the moves wrong the whole time. You know he's going to elbow you in the teeth by accident. And the worst thing is you have to take care of him because you're a little bit senior and stuff. That's brilliant. That's so good. And I think that is like such a balm for teenagers as well, because if you're othering too much, if you're feeling like more of an outsider, if you're feeling like these, I don't know what these mad magical creatures called girls or sports people or whatever are, you know, that's no good.
I really like what you said about the dancing as well, because the slow dancing, Jesus Christ, wasn't that the most exciting thing ever, kind of like, and it would be so like, like you said, like I was fascinated by girls, but then no confidence. Like, and I would also have a lot of girlfriends, you know, which is that kind of, I think that happens a lot to the nice guys in inverted commas, or the people pleasers, you know, where, not that there's anything wrong. Like, I'm delighted that I still have kind of 50-50 male-female ratio in my friends. But, and I'm very comfortable that way. So that's the great upside. But when there is also a very different part of becoming a man or an adult, and I do think the slow dancing, like when you'd have like a school, we'd have these school dance things, and then the slow song, there'd be maybe only 5 slow songs in a night or whatever, and you'd find a girl and you would just kind of have the hands on the shoulders, you know, and it'd be actually like there's nothing vaguely sexual or anything about it. But you'd be so nervous, but it'd be such a high as well. But there were, like you say, there are adults there, and for me, that it was always, like she's only kissed a girl, like nearing the end of like second, or well, I don't know, it doesn't even matter. But it's more like
no details, Bart. Where is she now?
Let's get
let's get her on the pod.
That'd be very interesting. I can tell you that. But even just like I was quite slow with all that stuff, and with physical intimacy and stuff. But it was like just the great rush of excitement of dancing with someone like that, and I do think that's good.
I was talking to somebody who works with teenagers, and he in various capacities, but he was supervising a youth disco. This is like last year, it was very recently. And he said it was ridiculous. There was like 14, 15-year-olds, you know, maybe. And he was like, all the girls were on the dance floor and all the lads were like backed up against a wall, awkwardly talking to each other and like looking sideways at the girls. So he's there with a couple of other like men supervising. He's like, for fuck's sake, lads, would you not up and God, what is this, you know? Like, oh no, and like nobody wants to be the first one to do it, right? But eventually, like he kind of I think he kind of dragged somebody out by the ear, basically, you know. And so the lads start to mingle.
And you might even be delighted that they did.
Yeah.
In a weird way.
Yeah.
Because it's like, I didn't do this. I'm forced to be here.
Exactly.
But you needed that boost.
You never want to stand out as a teenager, which is the mad thing. You want to violently assert your own identity, but also not stand out.
I'm so individual, but please don't look at me. Yeah, 100%.
But so anyway, the lads, some of the lads come out, and one of the lads is dancing with one of the girls, and at the end of a slow song, there's a wee shift. A wee shift, right? And so like him and the other like supervisors were just like, great, And he said the girl handled it so well. She was just a creature full of pure grace. There was the little kiss, and she just kind of turned.
It wasn't even a shift. It was a nice, polite.
And he said, the boy, like, knees went to jelly, face went red, turned around, staggered back to his friends, and I was like, woo! So that supervisor got to go over and say, for fuck, be cool. Just
was it his friends that went who or himself?
His friends.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
It's so uncool. And just this, you've reminded me of another story which is not mine, but I hope the teller will not mind me telling it. But a very good friend of mine in secondary school, maybe about 15 years old, and a bit like me and maybe like you, but like a kind of a quiet, kind of nerdy music kind of fella. And he had a crush on a girl in his class, in his French class, right? And they had a French lesson, and the teacher was just like, we're just going to talk about our favorite French things, and like, here's some French food, here's a clip from a French film, and here is some French music. And she played some strange electronic music. And she's like, does anyone know who this is? And my friend is just like, and the teacher's like, what's that? He's like, it's Jean-Michel Jarre. He really likes Jean-Michel Jarre. He's like getting into electronic music. And the girl he liked sat in the row in front of him, and she turned around to him and she looked him dead in the eye, and she was like, how the fuck do you know that? You're a fucking freak, boy.
And there's such archetypes because I know that girl.
Yeah,
I know that girl. There was those girls in secondary school who abhorred pretending that you would know anything.
Yeah,
but they still had more confidence than us. Yeah. Just I think because they were aware of like that we were all like, oh, heavenly creatures. Yeah. But then they were just like, why would you know anything? And you're like, no, I'm actually really interested. And so I know that person really well.
I just love that he showed a little bit of his true soul.
Like, just crush. Well, it's also that thing that they say that a lot, don't they? That just as men having to deal with rejection, like it's such a big thing in that arena. I think that we're all so used to just go, please, can we be near you? No. Yeah. But standing out. Like, you're so right. It's like I feel all these deep thoughts. Yeah. And I'm in love for the first time, and my heart, and oh my God, and it's so deep, and I'm so unique. Yeah. But then also, please don't anyone ever fucking look at me. And that was the weird thing for me when I started doing theatre. I was thinking when you mentioned Tom Hardy earlier, or you were looking at your notes, I saw a clip of him recently where he's like, oh yeah, I wasn't very good at football and science, and the theatre people were quite forgiving. And I really felt that. I was like, oh, these are my crowd. I like these kind of dramatic but sensitive and kind people. But then the weird flip side of it is then you do go on stage and stand out. Yeah. But it was more, I think, actually the inclusion of it that I loved. It's so uncomfortable. Yeah. Being, I think for the anally retentive people, this episode will now just be called School Days, and there will be a friendship part 2 where I do get to grill Anthony because he deflected horribly. Now that's a mean thing to say. You didn't. I'm joking. But there will be a friendship part 2 probably. But just to think about, especially school days, man, it's so uncomfortable. Yeah. If someone would send you back there now, Well, it depends. If you learned what you've learned, then it'd be like, there's so many things now where I'm like, why was that so hard for me? Just say no, or just do this or whatever. But you haven't learned those things yet.
No.
And your body is completely different, and it's just like, oh God, I'm just realizing my daughter is nearly turning 10. Oh God. I'm going to have to...
Good luck, buddy.
Oh no, that just hit me like a fucking nuke.
Yeah.
I'm going to
You're
have
going
to...
You're going to have to show her the Inbetweeners is what you're going to have to do. I know I've talked to a few mums who were like, that show is the best thing. Like, as soon as my daughter was like, she was like, you need to understand some things about teenage boys, and this show is going to explain. This is better than any documentary. Yeah.
Very uncomfortable.
Do you know what I think what I love about teenagehood is how high the stakes are.
Yeah.
It is immensely uncomfortable. It is immensely difficult. You're always tired. You're always hungry. You know, you're always hyper.
Yeah.
You're always sad. You know, you're always chasing. So, like, you find a new band and it like sets your world on fire. Yeah. You have to tell everyone. It's like, my God, have you heard about these guys, The Clash? You know, and that's beautiful. And I think that leads to like these huge swings between joy and despair and all this stuff. You know, and like you show up and then you're punished for showing up, and then, you know. But I'm like, that energy, that there's so much creative energy in teenagers. And I think that's why I hate to see them being too hard on themselves, you know, like putting pressure on themselves to, you know, take on the burdens of the world. And, you know, it's like, I'm a big fan of activism and stuff like that. And I think it's really healthy for teenagers. Like I said, I was working with a charity in Belarus and I made some great friends during it and stuff. But like, there's a difference between activism and responsibility, you know. And I'm like, as a teenager, be a bit of a fucking mess, you know, and explore and play. And I think that I don't know, just something about that creative energy. I think I almost, you know, you talked about how nice everyone was in college, and and I think that's definitely true, but I think there was part of me that missed that wild, uncontrolled, creative fire of teenagehood.
Yeah, because even now when you meet people who knew you back then, they know a weird side of you that, like, the college thing, in a way, it's quite, I want to say clandestine, but that's not the right word. What's the right word? It's kind of, it's very, you've got it under control and it's quite above board. And you do go, like, you do get messy drunk and that kind of stuff. Yeah. But as a person, you're already much more together. Yeah. Whereas the people who know you from those days, And I was just thinking, you've such angst and such, it's all so tumultuous. Then when people are good with teenagers or are really supportive that way or see something in you and support that, I remember being really grateful for that. People are like, oh, it's lovely we loved it when you played the guitar, or when there's something like that, or, oh, you wrote this story, you wrote this poem, it was amazing. Like, and sometimes, especially these teachers then, because you would only see them as teachers and just like, oh, whatever, or maybe you would even equate them with authority or gatekeepers or whatever. But then if they would actually go, hey, you wrote, I remember one time I did an essay about the Odyssey. I loved Greek mythology, still do. And I wrote this, I went far beyond, you know, with poems and stuff and all that, and the teacher, who I just always saw as a kind of a grumpy grey beard, he would come up to me and he was like, you know, that was fucking brilliant, I really enjoyed reading that. And that then, it really takes you aback, because you get so much negative attention in those years. You get so much like, don't be doing that, don't be doing, guys, you have to do this, we have to drag you to, you want to sleep in, you can't, you know, it's like everything is pushing you. But then if someone goes, hey, that's great. And I helped recently, a 16-year-old with some things on the guitar, and it just felt like, oh, that's such a lovely, full, and it was really acknowledged then as well by the parent who asked me to do it. And she actually gave me something, a gift, and I noticed I was really like, oh, that's great. I love that, because that was me. That same creative, artsy kind of just figuring this out. And I know that I really benefited from people being supportive then. So it's nice then when you suddenly, and you only notice it afterwards, otherwise you're probably a bit of a dick. So if you're like, hello, I'm going to swan in and being great. But it was more that I was just like, oh yeah, okay, that was helpful. And that was the same help I was given by someone else. So it's kind of paid forward.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It was not my experience.
I'm sorry. I'm really sorry to hear that, man. Yeah.
No, it's. I think it's something I try to do now in the few times.
I think you do that, and I think you appreciate it. But I'm sorry, it hurts me a little bit. I want to touch here, but my laugh.
It hurts you in your lavalier mic.
Yeah. Can you hear my heart beating with this microphone?
Scrunch.
Yeah. But
my experience with authority was always that, like, if I wanted to do anything of value or show up as myself, I had to do it in opposition to that. So, like, my bass teacher, stopped talking to me basically, and I don't know why, but he was hyper critical of me when I started playing rock music and experimental improv. And I remember one time he came to a band practice, like we were a bunch of like 16-year-olds. He came to watch the four of us practice, and he just ragged on me for the whole thing, you know. And I was developing my own style of bass playing, which was a little bit more active and melodic. He's like, no, the whole time. So I was like, stopped going to him. My kung fu teacher threw me out of the class. And then in secondary school, like, I was just in constant conflict with the teachers, you know. We were on a school trip, and I was dressed like a metaler, right? Because we were in Barcelona or something like that. So we were wearing our own clothes. So I had, like, you know, baggy jeans and a metaler t-shirt and a leather jacket, right? And like greasy hair.
Yeah.
But back in those days, mixtapes were a really big thing.
Yeah.
And I used to make mixtapes for my friends. I burned some CDs, and I had this series called Quiet Shit, right?
Right.
And it was all like songs by rock bands, but like quiet songs, right? So it would have been things like, you know, Elderly Woman Behind the Counter in a Small Town by Pearl Jam and things like, so like, you know, rock bands, but like some of their quieter things. Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You by Zeppelin and things like this. So, and there was some really, like, it was mostly acoustic, and it was, you know. So we were driving a long bus, and there was a CD player on the bus, and everyone was like, Miss, can we listen to some music? Can we listen to some music? She's like, no. And they were like, you know, throw on Anthony's CD, Miss. Anthony's got a good CD. And I was just like, oh, I did not want the, you know. Yeah. And she was like, no. And everyone kept on her, and she was like, okay, fine. And she like looked at me. You could see the judgment in her eyes. You know, I like handed her the CD. Yeah. And again, it's mostly like acoustic stuff. Yeah. And she puts it on, at like one volume, and nobody can hear it. And it's like, will you turn it up, Miss? And she turned it up, and it's the song Going to California by Led Zeppelin. And it's like a really quiet song, but there's one bit where Robert Plant has to be Robert Plant to go, and it's like 2.5 seconds long. And she turned it on there, and she was like, no, and just turned it off and ejected it. And I remember we used to try to play music and stuff like that at lunchtime, you know, and we just weren't allowed. We would like organize concerts, and they would cancel them like an hour beforehand, just saying, actually, no, we don't think it's good for the teenagers to self-express. We think it could set a dangerous precedent. And I had an English teacher who was mad about me, right? Yeah. I was doing honours English, and I think what they used to do with the classes is in the honours classes, they would put in a few students from more troubled backgrounds, right, just kind of to disperse them, okay? And there was one student, and he was from a disadvantaged background, and he would always be sat in the front row, and like a lot of this stuff seemed to be going over his head, and, you know, she would keep him right in front of her because she's like, oh, this guy is trouble, you know, none of his friends are in the class, and he was fucking miserable. Yeah. And we had to do a book report.
Oh, I think, go on.
Yeah, and I hope I haven't told it on the pod before, but anyway, we had to do a book report, and I remember, like, this guy, like, just kind of hanging his head, and I went up to him afterwards, and I was like, because he was a nice lad, like, he was, anyway, and I was like, I have this book, man, I think you might enjoy it. It's Waylander by David Gemmell. It's about an assassin. It's kind of like Taken, basically, or John Wick or something like that, but with crossbows, you know? Yeah. And And I was like, look, man, you might enjoy it. Like, I have it, just take it,
Yeah.
you know? And he came up to me a few days later. He's like, I've read it twice, man. It's so good. It's so good, you know? And I remember the teacher, anyway, the next week, she was like, okay, and now everyone's time to do their book reports. And yeah, we'll start with you, David. And she turned to the guy in the front row, and he like kind of sat up because I knew he'd done it. Yeah. And she was like, no, you didn't do it. Of course you didn't. And then she went to the next person. And I was like, as much as she liked me, I couldn't have any respect for someone because she just killed that guy's joy of literature, publicly humiliated him in the class. And look, she was in her own pain and stuff like that. I'm sure she had her own stuff going on, but yeah, my experience as a teenager was always like, you need to show up for yourself in opposition to authority. Maybe authority figures can be of some use to you at certain times, but like can't rely on them. So I'm not saying that's how it is, but that was definitely my teenage experience.
No, well, and it's just making me think because I definitely have authority issues, and I definitely also experienced that in school. So in a way, maybe I was lucky, and it was a nice. I do think it may have been a nicer school. Also, I really try to remember those, and there were a few where people just really tried. So maybe that's just luck as well, and I can imagine as well. I really presented, and it hurts me now in a way, but I really presented in a very open and proper way, you know, like, whereas I think I actually was more introverted or more than I was showing to be, but it was kind of, and I've seen that in the past as well, where I'd be in something with someone else, and people would go, oh, it's very handy to have Bart here because he can, you know, there was that kind of over-effortful way of being that I think that was not so triggering for people. So I can see that as well, that you might have sometimes, so this is not, I'm not victim blaming, but more like I could, you know, I sometimes regret that now, I think I really tried to fit what was expected of me a lot. But then you pay a price for that later when you have to deconstruct and let that go. And then also you just have to be a bit fucking lucky. Because I do think definitely the fact that I picked that school where it was a lot more creative really helped. And that kind of decision to, when I was 12, 13, to go, I'm not gonna go with everyone I know and go for the sort of expected option, but the other thing was really rewarded. Sure. Because those more creative types, there were still arseholes and horrible people and bullies and all that, but the more creative people, again, like I said about the theatre crowd, they were really like, yeah, nice, we see something in you, and we like. So I think sometimes those choices can really be rewarded, but then that choice probably wasn't available for you, you know, and it's like, because you would have definitely chosen a more creative I also think sometimes that Ireland in the 80s, or so okay, that was in the noughties, I suppose, when we were both going to secondary school, but even just, I think Ireland in the 90s, for instance, we both grew up in the 90s, very different, I'd say, than Holland in the 90s. Like, I always think about the fact that my grandmother went to university, you know, like, she didn't finish, but she did, like, she went to university in the 40s. Yeah. You know, like, that kind of thing that would be unheard of for anyone Irish, you know. So I think that's a very different context as well. But I do feel sorry for teenage Anthony, because he made it anyway.
You know, like, we were talking about where you put your energy, and like, it is interesting, like, at those. Well, first of all, I do think your experience is your reality. Yeah, you know, like 100%. I think that's it. Like, I'm not going to say this is the way the world is, but I am going to say that is the way my world was. Yeah, you know, and
you can claim that. Yeah,
but when you are under all those pressures, excuse me, when you are under all those pressures and you are like full of hormones and emotions and stuff like that, like what you end up leaning on is a lot of the stuff I gravitated towards then left my life for a long time and has come back lately, and I'm much the happier for it. So things like music, books, certain speakers and philosophers and things like this. Yeah, it's interesting. Like I remember reading certain books that Lord of the Rings has been a constant and stuff like that. But like even like reading Krishnamurti and like just enjoying his vibe, you know, definitely not quote unquote getting it, but reading him over and over and just being like, there's something here that just resonates with me. And only lately do I feel like I'm starting to kind of understand him in any kind of depth, you know. But like that doesn't matter. Like I think that's one of the nice things about teenage. I think just go with your gut, like what you're really drawn to. Those books and movies, music. I've been listening to a load of Joni Mitchell lately. Hejira, because my car doesn't have it only has a CD player. Yeah. So I have like my old CDs. So I've been listening to like what was I listening to? Yeah, Joni Mitchell, Roy Gallagher live in Europe and stuff like that, and things I haven't listened to a long time. Hejira by Joni Mitchell, the album she did with Jacob Stories and Pat Metheny, and you know, just I think. And then I think we go into our safe 20s where we're like a little bit more self-assured and we can present a certain way. And it's like, oh, they don't need to see that about me. And I really kind of want to be the kind of person that looks like this. And
you move out of the home and you have a lot more autonomy. Yeah,
that's it. You have more autonomy, you have more agency, but that doesn't necessarily make things more authentic, you know? And sometimes we can be like, oh yeah, I'm going to do myself a bit of a makeover. I'm not going to wear those. I'm not going to be a metaler anymore. I'm not going to be a gahead anymore. I'm not going to be a, you know, whatever it is anymore. Yeah. Sometimes it's worth reclaiming a few of those little bits. There's tremendous power and energy. And like you said, the people that know you from those times where they're like, I don't care how many letters there are after your name, boy. I remember how upset you got when that girl wouldn't shift you. You know, like I remember the bad poem you wrote and you made all of us sit there and listen to it.
100%. And you would think now, like maybe there was a girl you liked or something, and you think about that person now and you're like, oh geez, that would be horrible.
Oh, terrible.
Fit. Yeah. Like we would not go together at all. But then someone brings you back like, yeah, but that was your whole thing. And we kind of narrate our own history and we change it and we kind of go, oh, well, that led me to this and that led me to that. But that's not how it looks in the moment. It's just like, this was the biggest thing. And I would be so like the most painful thing when I go back to my old emails or something is just being so adamant about things where I'm like, the fuck are you talking about? Or even going, who is this guy? I don't remember being like that. I don't remember having those opinions. Like that's sometimes you need to re-own that. But there's definitely, I like what you're saying also about music, which is for both of us obviously such a theme. And The Lord of the Rings, which I also discovered when I was like 15 or something. And just such a huge constant companion still. But there's like CDs. I really got into Sting's music when I was around that age. And the first album I got was like the live album he did on 9/11. I never realized it was on 9/11, but they were at his house in Tuscany and played these beautiful, more jazzy renditions of his songs. And that's still one of the few, like now everything is so Spotify-y and, well, you guys are pretty good actually with playing full records, but I'm not. I listen to my own playlist mainly and stuff, but that's one CD that I will always just listen through beginning to end because it's a whole vibe, and also because I saw a documentary they made about that later where they're all like really joyous and they're in Italy and they're having great food and there's lovely people, and then suddenly it's like day of the gig, fucking Twin Towers get hit and everyone's like, oh God, what do we do now? And Sting is kind of like, nah, we're not gonna do anything. And then all the musicians are kind of like, well, we're sad, so we're gonna play anyway. Mm-hmm. These people have come down. It's like a little crowd of 200 people or something. And he's like, will we not just do it? And then at the beginning, and then they do it. And in the beginning, you see him kind of being a bit like, okay, and gonna do this in, you know, dedication to those who've lost their lives today. And they sing Fragile, which is obviously very apt. But then he can't help, and it all makes sense. I'm not making fun of him. Like, of course, it was such a huge. It still has ripples, that event in Western society. but then like he can't but help enjoy the music, and it gets really cheerful by the end. And I think he just says something like, well, we can't, this is the way we resist, which is beautiful.
I think it's more important to make art in those moments.
Yeah.
I heard the Emerald podcast, one of the few podcasts I listen to. They have a recent episode called Singing to the Beloved in Times of Crisis. It's quite nice. But even previously, they were talking about like end times. And Josh Fry made this really interesting thing where it's like a lot of Western people are now absolutely panicking about the stake, climate change and so on. And, very understandably so. But he's like, a lot of indigenous and minority peoples have been living in end times for hundreds of years. The idea that their whole culture and civilization could be snuffed out by an unfightable adversary, a colonizer or whoever. They've been living with that for hundreds of years. And he's like, okay, look at them. Look at black people in the States during the times of lynching and stuff like that. And he's like, where would you find them every Sunday? In church, singing gospel music. He's like, there is a role for obviously action. There's a role for resistance, but there is also a role for art and music and community. And joy isn't the right word, but I also often think about Hallelujah by Leonard Cohen, where it's it's not, I know it's a cold and it's a broken hallelujah, but it's still an actual hallelujah. It's an actual celebration,
100%. And you touched on a few things there. I recently sang that song with a French girl at the Cliffs. It was really funny. It was one of those, she was 14 or 15 and she was just really excited to be singing some music with me. So she kept coming up. I was kind of I love when there's interaction, but I was kind of also I don't know. I'm 20 years older than you. I don't know any of the music.
You didn't break out your Taylor Swift
She had
cover.
this whole list, and it was looked like cool music, but I was I'm really sorry, dude. I don't know any of this shit. I'm an old man now. Yeah. And she's like, oh, do you know Hallelujah? And I was like, oh, yeah. And I started to just try and find a key that would work for both of us, because obviously very different voices. And I picked one kind of in the middle. But it's funny when you kind of go, and it goes like this, the fourth, the fifth, the minor fall, and the major. And I was just kind of climbing that ladder going, oh God, where is the top end of this song? But we made it. But it was kind of a beautiful, I only just now you said it, realized it was a beautiful experience of the song, because it is that hallelujah, it is that reaching up high in terms of pitch anyway. And we both made it, and that it was really joyous. And I also think the thing which you're saying about black people singing in church, that's never going to be wrong. Whereas your political action is fraught. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. But that is playing a complex game in a very complex world. And I'm not saying don't do it, not at all. But I know that the art is nearly always going to be a good thing to be doing. I think that is always going to be. I just see it a lot. I think what it made me think of what you said there is what I see a lot with activism now. And I don't want to go into that because that's a different thing. But we create a hardness when we're opposing things, and it gets harder and it gets tighter,
Too long a conflict can make a stone of the heart.
Say that again?
Too long a conflict makes a stone of the heart.
That's beautiful. And that's exactly what I mean. And I don't mean no conflict or don't do anything, but that can happen. Whereas I think with the opening up of music and art, and that's always connection.
I think there's a role for both, the inhale and the exhale, the softness and the hardness, absolutely. Yeah.
Definitely, but I would say we have a lot of the hardness.
We do. At the moment, I think we do.
And I think we have always, and I think the softness is always it can never really be enough. But it's kind of nice the way we traverse this terrain of the teenage years, and it'll probably be called school days or something, will it?
I think teenagehood, because it's not so much about school.
Yeah, school days. I meant more like, but teenagehood is fine. Yeah, and then we'll do friendships another time because what I was I had some things I was interested in to hear from you about that. So we'll do that some other time. But what I like is that the way we traversed it, and both had different experiences and some similar experiences, but that music and art was definitely a lifesaver. And that was another thing. My two main albums was the Oldest Time Stings, Oldest Time, and U2 Live at Slane Castle, because that concert is just insane. I think I've talked about this before, but that's just such an insane arc of joy and then grief, because Bono had just buried his father, and I started listening to that just after my friend died, so I listened to that all the time and cried over it many, many times, especially that song Kite. Who's to say where the wind will take you, say what it is will break you. I don't know which way the winds will blow. Who's to know when the times come around? I don't want to see you cry. All I know is this is not goodbye. That was very meaningful to me. But then also just the balm of that whole concert, because after that then it lifts again and it's very joyous again, and it ends up with Walk On, which is beautiful as well. But I think it's cool that we both we met through music here, and we both found a huge bomb in that weird time through music.
Well, and something you've just pointed out there, so they're two live albums, and most of the important, not all of them, but an awful lot of the important albums to me at that time were live albums. Pearl Jam Live on Two Legs was a really big one. Like, it opens with Corduroy, I don't want to take what you can give. I would rather starve than eat your bread. This is like, all the things that others want from me can't be what they want because I'm free. Chili Peppers Live at Slane Castle as well, just to be like, you can just be mates mucking about on stage. And if you really love the music you're playing, and if you're like, there was such self-expression, like to the Chili's, and then the Flecktones Live at the Quick, where I'm just like, oh my god, there's levels to music nerdage, and this guy has a tube and throat singer coming on for the first one, and then there's multiple oboes, and just absolute, like, I was often getting made fun of for being a music nerd, and then I was like, oh no, this is where this can lead you, and that can only be a good thing. There's something about those live albums, and that is something I'm really sad we've kind of lost now, because remember, concert DVDs used to be a big thing, and now I think people do like NPR Tiny Desk concerts or something like that, but like, or they'll do like a really, boiler room sets, and all those things are cool, but like, I have a load of great concert DVDs there, man. Joni Mitchell, Shadows and Light, again with Jacko and Mattini and Don Elias, and I have Nigel Kennedy, and Rory Gallagher, Irish Tour 74. Like, there's, I think, something about the energy of live performance as a teenager. Like, you're not just listening to music, you are listening to people. You are listening to people playing music. You are feeling that energy, and something about... I hope teenagers are still getting that, basically, in this day and age of, like, the mega musicians and hyper production stuff like that.
And it's the whole thing, in a way. Like we've talked about before, it's the whole thing. It's the call and response. It's the music. And I have a recording of me and some friends playing in quite a nice music club in the Netherlands, where they had really good recording gear and stuff, but they also mixed in the audience. And we did kind of a theatrical version of Where the Wild Roses Grow, which is a murder ballad. And I really went into my Nick Cavey kind of, and really made it quite theatrical. And you could just hear the crowd kind of laugh, and it's such a nice thing to have, because it really is that moment in time. But obviously that was us, and that was a tiny thing, but those, especially when great musicians like what we were talking about do that, it just gives you, it gives you something that's not easy to replace, thank God. But even when you said like, I hope they're still getting it, well, it's very easy for them to get it though. Like, we could make that happen. Maybe we should make that happen.
We can be your Pearl Jam.
No, that's not what I'm saying. But I mean, like, we could all. It's not like, because I do think that whole over-engineered stuff is running out of road.
I think so too.
I think so often now I listen to something and I go, yeah, there is something in there that's being fucked with, or especially when people do it with vocals, it gets tricky. So they'd be getting that. And actually, the tiny desks are nice in a way as well.
They are nice, but they're just a certain vibe. And it's nice when there's other stuff as well. And as teenagers, we need all the balms and all the down regulation we can get. So that was a glorious and unexpected trip into a part of my past I didn't think I'd be talking about.
Yeah, it was a turn. It was a turn, and it was funny that it was nearly me trying to steer it back to topic. But
it's rare that it's me like dragging us back into the the weird depths.
Yeah, because I was just like, no, Anthony, I want to know about this, that, and the other. And then after a couple of attempts, I just like, fuck it. Yeah. We'll just have to do that some other time. So get ready for that one.
Yeah. Dangerous words.
This has been Weshtern Philosophy. Follow us on the socials at Weshtern Philosophy Pod. If you want to support the podcast, you can join our Patreon to help the show grow, or make a one-off donation via the Ko-fi link in the episode description. We'll be back next week with more chats and another topic. Slán.